Hello there, and welcome back to Gooner U, where there are no degrees because the learning never stops. I'm Dove, a TA here at Gooner U, and my friend Keith is our stalwart distinguished professor of Arsenal and football studies. Enter our classroom as we discuss the week's news involving Arsenal, Premier League, Champions League, international football, and sometimes MLS, because we're Americans. This week, Arsenal hosted Sporting CP in the second leg of the Champions League quarterfinal round, and then traveled to Manchester City to play what may ultimately be the deciding match in our Premier League campaign this season. Hello, Keith.
Hi, Dove. It's gonna be hard to keep this one PG tonight, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's fresher for me than for you. I was not watching this live. I finished the replay about an hour ago, so. Ooh, that stung.
This one bothers me.
Yeah,
but we'll get into that. So.
We will. On a brighter note, so my son had an interesting match earlier today. So this was. We'd been fairly temperate this week in the Hudson Valley. It had been in the 80s earlier in the week. Our baseball game that we had on Tuesday was actually pretty warm, like in the 80s. We had a practice in the 80s. It was at the highs were in the 70s or 80s. Today, some kind of front came through, and it was 40 degrees Fahrenheit, along with driving, persistent rain that never stopped. This caused a plurality of his team not to show up. There were 8 kids there, including him. So the outfield players did not get much in terms of rest. Most of them played most of the match. It was overall a well-played match, considering the unending, bitterly cold rain. They did pretty well. Like in the first half, they scored the first goal, but then conceded 3 and ended 1-3. In the second half, they came back with 3 consecutive goals to take the lead, which was great, and then gave up a penalty. So this was my son's second penalty to defend. And if you recall, in the fall for that season, he actually blocked that penalty, and it was a great moment. And I think that set his expectations for his ability at stopping penalties at the wrong level where they should not have been. And this kid who took this penalty did not kick it straight in his direction like all the other penalties I've seen at his age level so far. It was a well-taken penalty, and there was really nothing that my son could have done to block it. He jumped in the right direction. This was a lofted kick, maybe a foot under the crossbar and off to the side, not all the way in the corner, but probably a third of the way, like from the corner. He couldn't have gotten there. He couldn't have reached it, but that didn't stop him from like bawling after the match, like getting down on himself for not blocking it. So for the second time this week, I've been consoling crying youth athletes, because in our first game, both of our pitchers, like as they were taken off, I think maybe even 3 of our pitchers as they were taken off, were each crying. They didn't do badly. They did fine, but it's just dealing with the pressure of being a pitcher. And same thing with him. It's like basically just the pressure of being the keeper and feeling it on you. It's like, it's okay. That's part of the game. Just learn from it. If there's anything you think you could have done better, learn from it. Take that with you into your next game, but know that you did everything you could. You know, you're 9 years old. It's fine. So yeah, I'd much rather talk about his game than Arsenal's games this week. Is the moral of this story?
Right? No, I think I mean, it's when we talk about the how often you score from penalties, right? As a keeper, you do that more than so many others. You have to put in the back of your mind. Actually, I'm reminded there's a line that goes around, and I'm going to butcher the details, but it was a hockey goalie. And he said, "Imagine if every time you made a mistake at your job, a red light and sirens went off, and thousands of people started cheering. Like that's the life of the goalie and the keeper. That's just how it goes. So you have to, you got, you're going to give them up. You got to be able to move on."
Well, exactly, and that's something that when I was doing the keeper clinics in the fall, that's something that I took time at the beginning of each of these sessions, because these were all kids who were playing keeper for their teams, and I'd ask them, okay, raise your hand. How many of you were scored on this week? And all their hands would go up. And I'd tell them, look around, right? This is what happens. How many of you made saves? And their hands also went up. And I tell them, that's what you focus on. Count your saves, not your goals conceded. I don't know if they listen, but I try.
As a teacher, what you discover is that one of them is listening. And it's never the one you think.
Well, we begin the news today on a somber note. You want to explain to me the black armbands that we saw Arsenal wearing in Manchester today?
They were in honor, I'm sure people saw the news of the story, of Alex Manninger, I believe, based on listening to highlights is how it's actually pronounced, the Austrian, who was a former Arsenal keeper, bounced around Europe, spent a lot of time in Italy, but he was an Arsenal player, a backup keeper behind David Seaman and Jens Lehmann from, I think they saw 1997 until 2002. Arsblog had a really nice recollection of him, in particular, play some of the games he played in 1997-98 season, which ultimately were critical to us running down Manchester United and winning that title. And then as well, a penalty shootout win against West Ham when we ultimately won the FA Cup, though he did not play in the final. That was given to the regular number one, David Seaman. Also had this, certainly go check out the Arsblog piece. It was his daily blog post on Friday, but it did also include this fantastic clause involving, quote, the rearranged fixture against Wimbledon after the abandoned game in December because the floodlights were found to have been tampered with by a, quote, Far Eastern betting syndicate.
Whoa. Salacious.
1998, or I guess 97, I think, because that was the game when the game was actually scheduled. Yeah, what a world. What a world.
Meanwhile, elsewhere in England, I hear that there have been some interesting developments in the championship.
Well, not so much. Well, I guess interesting is the word for it. And Arsenal adjacent, because the first promotion spot has been sealed. Coventry City has clinched their spot in next season's Premier League. They will be joining us. We have also clinched our spot in next season's Premier League. Apparently, we've done that a while ago. But yeah, shout out to the Canaries under, no, they aren't the Canaries. Sorry, why did I call them that? Sky Blues. They have birds in their logo, so that's why I was
okay.
Sky Blues. Coventry City will be back. First time in the Premier League since 2001. They're 25 years down in the down below the Premier League. They actually dipped all the way down to League Two, actually, about a little less than a decade ago. So Frank Lampard, the longtime Chelsea player, came in as manager, took them up. The general sense is they probably aren't going to be very good next year, but they'll be in it. So good for them.
Yeah.
Congrats to them. They are 10 points clear of Ipswich and Millwall for the championship title, but now they have cleared the spot to they're in one more full promotion spot left, and then of course the championship playoffs to follow.
So in other world news, I saw an article that caught my attention because the graphic that they showed with it was of a familiar stadium to me, and not necessarily the one that longtime viewers might assume. So this article that'll be in the show notes was talking about the naming rules for World Cup. And like we're familiar with for UEFA competition, right? We don't play at the Emirates Stadium. We play at Arsenal Stadium, right? So there's similar rules in effect for the various venues across the continent that will host World Cup matches, where it's not, for instance, AT&T Stadium, it's Dallas Stadium, right, et cetera. They're the city names. The one exception that was kind of funny to me was where I saw Atlanta United play last summer. Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It is a very striking building with, I don't know if avant-garde is the right word, but striking architecture, not what you would typically see. And a massive, massive Mercedes-Benz roundel on top, which apparently is so integral to the architecture that they cannot be asked to cover it up in a way that wouldn't leave the building looking like trash.
Yeah, well, so we should be clear that the renaming will take place insofar as during the tournament it will be known as the Atlanta Stadium. But yes,
right.
it is interesting. I guess you I don't know if you would have seen the roof open, but basically it's like these interlocking panels that all slide, like rotate away and rotate back in. It's really quite cool to look at.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I guess I could see because structurally how that would go. But like I have been, for example, to AT&T Stadium in Arlington, not Dallas. And those AT&T logos are pretty big. It is interesting to sort of look at and see this. There is, however, one exception to these stadiums renaming. One of them actually does get to keep their name.
Oh yeah,
did you catch which one that was?
No, I don't think I did.
It is BC Place in Vancouver because BC it's British Columbia Place. I believe it's actually going to be officially it's going to be called something like Vancouver BC Place. But that's the name of that. Let's say since it's not a sponsor name, it won't change.
Yeah, I'd imagine that the reason they do this is the same with UEFA, where it's just basically almost every stadium now does have a sponsor essentially in the name, and they want all sponsor revenue going to them. They don't want to be giving any attention to companies that didn't pay them for that attention. So yeah, sure. I do wonder, do you know when like Chelsea hosts a match, for instance, a Champions League match, is it still called Stamford Bridge or is it called Chelsea Stadium? Do you know?
I'm pretty sure it's Stamford Bridge.
Right.
Because what they don't, it's not that they, because it would be particularly weird if they were, tacking Champions League or FIFA sponsors onto the stadium's name instead of that. That would be weird. But what they don't want is Emirates is not a Champions League sponsor. Therefore, Arsenal cannot play at Emirates Stadium. But if it was just, when it was Highbury, Arsenal Stadium, Highbury, that was perfect.
That's going to be the next thing I ask, right? Yep, makes sense. The midweek match, I guess, ultimately went better than this weekend match. We'll begin our discussion there. This was the second leg against Sporting. We hosted them at the Emirates. Watching the the highlights again, there was a massive graphic. I don't know what was going on behind the one goal. It was like a huge banner that like spanned both decks. I don't know how they accomplished that.
Oh, the Tifo. I heard about it. I didn't actually see that pregame. Yeah, the Tifo. It was. It's a banner basically though, and it's raised up. They'll hang it from there and pulleys to pull it up. So I didn't actually see it. I heard a little bit about it. Said it looked kind of cool.
So you're saying if they're using pulleys, it's actually something that the club did in the stadium. This wasn't like a fan organized thing.
Well, no, the fans will do them, but they work with the club so that it's like set up properly.
That makes sense because I'm trying to imagine it's starting in the upper deck and working its way down to the lower decks. Like you'd have to like roll it over. Yeah, it's just that makes sense that it's got structural support.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we went into this match with a 1-0 lead given to us by Kai Havertz in stoppage time in the first leg, and we coasted on those fumes.
You'll say that, but this reminded me very much of the first leg in Lisbon, where we set out to make the game as uninteresting as possible. It was a low event game. To the point where we missed the chance for the obvious joke, which you said you watched the highlights, and I thought to myself, what highlights? Nothing happens. Yeah, this was look, I have been a long time watcher of the sport. I certainly am a connoisseur of certain kinds of games. You've I think developed an appreciation for the sport and what it can be. Goals you don't need goals to have excitement. There is such a thing as a scintillating or fascinating or a really interesting or even eventful 0-0 draw, right? Just because there are no goals doesn't mean the game can't be interesting. This game was not that. This was the other kind. This was the kind of thing where people talk about how much they don't like soccer because nothing happens. This is kind of the game they're looking at. It was not a very exciting game. But here's the thing. That's what we wanted, right? They needed to score. And in all of that, desperate need they had to score, how many shots on goal do you think they had?
It can't have been more than 2.
1.
Yeah.
They had 1 shot on goal. I believe it. That was it. They had 3 corners.
Yeah. So yeah, I think certainly not more than 2.
It was 1. They had 1 shot on target.
I believe it.
They had 8 shots. ESPN, at least as I look at, has them at 8 shots for the game. But how many of those kind of just floated away, missed? I mean, there was 1 opportunity they had that kind of, went by the post, but they were not generating terribly dangerous chances. They got 3 corners. If we think of corner kicks as kind of a proxy for generating pressure on the offensive end, they had 3. This is a game. We had 8 corners, by the way, just for comparison's sake. This is a game that I think we were largely in control of. I mean, would I have liked just to been a little more swashbuckling going forward? Yeah, I guess. But we kind of talked about it. Our lineup was a little, we're still rolling with Zubimendi, Rice, and Eza as the midfield, so it's kind of lower, right. A little bit lower octane, a little more defensive minded. I mean, Martinelli, Gyökeres, Madueke. Gyökeres is not gonna put this tie into his scrapbook. His career, in terms of his career highlights, his first games against Sporting since leaving, it was he had a rough one. Madueke was kind of Madueke. He does some good things. He does some head scratching things. I mean, it is fair to be a little put off by our own lack of offensive firepower in this game, but by and large, I did not feel the way that, much like the first leg, I felt like the game was this way because we wanted it to be this way, as opposed to the Bournemouth game where we looked kind of out of sorts and ultimately toothless. It was Southampton because we just weren't playing very well. This to me felt like the game that we wanted to play, and I'm largely okay with it.
So how do you think the club left the pitch feeling? Do you think that they're satisfied they did what they came out to do?
I mean, I think they're certainly happy. I mean, I was Declan Rice post-game, right? We're in the semifinals of the Champions League. It's the first time in our history we've been to 2 consecutive semifinals in the Champions League. Like, that's... We're one of the 4 best teams remaining in. Like, let's not undersell this. We're one of the 4 best teams remaining in Europe. Clearly, I listened a little bit actually earlier today to the handbrake off from after this game, where Amy Lawrence is like, ask the other English teams how did it go, how it went. Liverpool got trounced. City, Chelsea, Newcastle, and Spurs all got trounced in the previous round. Like, right, and there we are. We're like in that sense, it's a fantastic result. There is no bad result that puts you into the semifinals of the Champions League. Like, that's just, I'm not enough of an aesthete to really be bothered by that. I know some people are, but there's just, enjoy this moment, enjoy where we are, so, and again, I think a lot of this is outside noise. Like, I think a lot of this is about our style of play and whether or not we're the neutrals' favorites. And as I was asked that question in the press conference at some point this week, what he thinks about what other people talk about Arsenal, and he basically responded with, "I don't really care what other people think." Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. We are going to play the way we think we need to play, and if you don't like it, it's not our problem. I mean, they're going to suffer in comparison to the other Champions League quarterfinals taking place around them. I mean, at the same time, we were playing out a game that, let's be honest, we'd all rather pretend didn't happen. Bayern and Real Madrid went toe-to-toe in what apparently was a scintillating game. And PSG looked pretty well. They looked good ripping apart Liverpool in the first leg. Apparently the second leg this past week looked a little dicey for a while, but they ultimately pulled away. And then Atleti held on by their fingernails to hang on and beat Barcelona, which, by the way, Barcelona, a team which of course would beat us in the semifinals if they had made it, which they didn't. So yeah. So yeah,
I get what you're saying. No, it all makes sense. I see where you're coming from. I think for me, what I would have liked to see a win for the purpose of is more like, I wonder, had we won even 1-0 again in the second leg instead of drawing, because of the context around this match of being in the middle of a slump, essentially, right? Where we squeaked by with a last minute goal, in the first leg. I wonder how that helps their mentality at the weekend match going to Manchester City. I wonder if that helps just puff up their sails a little bit more and help get a result there,
But I would say, and we're not quite talking about the City game quite yet.
Right.
I would look at that though and say, like, I thought they played generally pretty well again. Like, I didn't see a team playing against City that looked scared or in a shell or anything like that.
That's true.
So in a mental sense, I think essentially what you're trying to argue, what you would be trying to argue, I'm not saying you're saying this, but what you're almost trying to argue this one is, well, if we had scored a goal against Sporting, obviously we would have scored another goal at the Etihad, and that's just not how that works. I don't. And I know you're not saying that, but I just I think that's fine. And look, we were a little ragged in terms of the lineup. I mean, Rice is still coming off a knock, so we're probably not 100%. Still no Ødegaard. Did we get Trossard in this game? I think he did come on.
Yeah, he came on 79th minute.
Yeah, I mean,
Martinelli.
Obviously Saka is still out. There are elements of this team. Kai Havertz couldn't really go the full length of the game. Obviously, we have an eye on the game coming up that was ultimately today. I mean, Madueke goes off hurt. It turns out it wasn't actually that serious, which was nice. I guess I just sort of look at all that, and I felt okay with this in the context of coming off the other game. I mean, look, we looked better against Sporting, I think, than we did against Bournemouth.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, we did look. We looked out of sorts. We looked troubled. I didn't get the same thing here. I mean, does that mean Bournemouth's better than Sporting? I don't think so. But I do. But the Premier League teams are pretty good.
Right.
It's a pretty deep league, and I thought we did it. And sure, you could look at the Sporting as a matchup and say it was the easiest team in the quarterfinals, maybe. But that's the prize you get for basically being the best team in the league phase.
Right.
That we did exactly what we were supposed to do.
Sure, no, I see that. You had mentioned before we recorded that Bayern apparently clinched the top spot in the Bundesliga.
Yes, they have won the Bundesliga with about a month and a half left in the season.
Yeah.
They've won the title, 11 out of the last 12 years, which I'm sure is perfectly healthy for German football, that the league is that non-competitive. They are very good. In fact, actually, this week broke... they still have 4 or 5 games left, and they've already broken the league record for most goals scored in a season, which is... I mean, you think about... I mean, I think... Bayern has had a lot of really good teams over the years, and this is the one that ended up breaking that record. Like, it's not like they set the record 2 years ago. This has been the record for some time, and they still have 5 games left. There's definitely a gap between the Bayern and the rest of the Bundesliga. Some of that is just obviously the quality they have currently. They have a a fair argument as a potential argument as best team in the world. They're certainly they're there in the semifinals. It is going to be a very interesting matchup between them and PSG in the semis.
Yeah. Just
the other side of that, though, of course, is like they are just so far ahead of the rest of the Bundesliga right now, and I don't think that's. I would be if I'm the rest of Germany, I'm a little concerned.
Yeah, I'm just, as someone who doesn't really closely follow any leagues other than the Premier League, what can they do about that? What strategies do they put in place?
In Germany, it's a little tougher because they have a lot of restrictions on the clubs already. Like they aren't owned by, like they have, was it the 50+1 rule? So
right. They have to be fan owned, right?
Right. They're still clubs in the more traditional sense, as opposed to most of the big Premier League sides are all owned by billionaires.
They're enterprises more than clubs. Yeah.
Yeah. So they'd have to find they'd have to have more restrictive spending rules, particularly probably in the form of a salary cap, but also that leads to a floor. There could also be some the way to do it might actually be in Major League Baseball in the U.S., which has no salary cap. They do have what they call a luxury tax, that teams that spend above a certain amount, have to pay a little extra. The problem with that, though, is you don't want a salary cap because if you're the Bundesliga, hey, if Bayern goes deep, that's good for German football overall. If they go deep in the Champions League and they need to be, and they've got their money generally organically through the result of that, but they get, obviously being Bayern Munich and being a global brand, they get sponsorships that aren't going to be available to a lot of smaller clubs. They also have the reputation, right? I mean, they're the alpha predator of the Bundesliga. So a good German player wants to go there. That's
interesting. The idea of like a luxury tax, I could see that working in that context where you have some kind of way to take some money, and this is sounding very socialist as it comes out of my mouth, but bearing that in mind, take some of their money beyond a certain amount that they spend on players and apportion that to the lower teams. And even if it's just like the top few who've earned their places behind them or something, just like reinvest in help level things a little bit, maybe. But yeah, it's I haven't thought this very thoroughly through.
No, and I can't say I really have either. I mean, I will say though, it's socialist. What are the Germans so worried about? But I do think it goes to the question, because American leagues are run like this. But remember that in American leagues, the teams are not competing against each other financially.
Right.
They're competing against other leagues. That's your I'm here in Houston, right? The Houston Dynamo's competition is not New York Red Bulls. It is on the field, but their competition is the Houston Rockets. Right. Because the competition is for eyeballs and for basically where people are going to be spending their money. So, in that sense, it is the kind of thing that, I look, if Bayern continues to go deep, if Germany continues to produce good players, and the Germans overall generally do well in the World Cup and the European Championships, nobody's really going to complain. But I do think it's something, one of the big advantages the Premier League has financially is television. And one of the things that makes the Premier League such an entertaining or such a valuable commodity is the level of competition within the league. Now, we say that there's a pretty good chance we're looking at Manchester City winning the title for the 9th time in 11 years. I mean,
yeah.
But there is a level of competition in the Premier League that just doesn't really exist in many of the other, even in some of the bigger leagues in Europe. And I do think it's a problem they're going to have to think about.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned Premier League TV rights and how that contributes to the money that's going to the Premier League clubs. So today, trying to watch this Manchester City match was my first experience with the YouTube TV membership that I began. I think I'm technically still in the trial period, but that I began last week after not being able to watch the Bournemouth match. I said, okay, never again. YouTube TV. And Manchester City, I followed Arsenal. So in theory, assuming this works right, and YouTube is generally pretty good with their technology, Google and YouTube. It's supposed to record every Arsenal match for me. That is televised. Obviously, we'll talk later about Newcastle's Peacock only, and fine. Obviously, I'll go to Peacock for that one. But so every televised Arsenal match, I should be able to watch. So I launched the YouTube app to try and do so, and clicked on it. And it was great. Like no exposure to spoilers. It was right there on my list. It was very easy. And overall, I'm happy with it. And then I tried to skip forward, 10 seconds, 20 seconds past the commercial that was wrapping up before the game, which again, I don't generally deal with because I pay for ad-free Peacock. Going to skip that, and it froze and locked up. And no matter how many times I tried, I couldn't get it to play. So I figured, okay, well, it's getting late. I need to watch this. We're going to be recording soon. I go to Peacock. And thankfully, in a way, Peacock was actually acting the same way. So it was actually something had gotten hosed on the Apple TV itself. I restarted it, and I'll erase that from my ledger when it comes to evaluating YouTube TV. That looks to not be its fault. But so I watched the first half in YouTube TV, and curious for a quality comparison because it's telling me, so it lets you pick which quality you're watching it at, and it defaulted to 1080p 60, so 1080 lines of resolution, 60 frames per second, but it also called it 1080p 60. I think enhanced was the word that came after it. So they're doing some kind of processing in theory to make it look even better. I was curious, was it a notable difference? I watched the second half in Peacock because this match being on NBC was also on Peacock. And honestly, I still feel like Peacock just looked a little bit sharper, a little bit better. I was a little bit happier with how that looked. So when given both options, I probably will still go to Peacock, or I'll maybe try doing the Bake Off again next time and see if I come away with the same impression. But so that was how I watched this ultimately gut-wrenching, disappointing match.
Yeah, you feel like for all that trouble, you almost didn't want to. For all that trouble, you deserve better. Yeah, this one was tough because I have to say, as positive as I was just talking about the sporting game, I actually thought we played pretty well overall. It's hard for me to walk away from this game and come to the obvious conclusion that Manchester City is better than Arsenal. I just can't say that on the course of this game, even though obviously in the end, they ultimately put they put the 2 goals past us and we got the 1. Yeah, this was an interesting one. I do think, I walked into this game with a sense that tactically, it was very much like the sporting game. They needed to score. They needed a win. A draw was not a bad result from our perspective. Mm-hmm. And certainly in the first half, I sort of came away with the feeling that we were playing the game we wanted. We're okay mucking it up. We're okay taking our time. Did they generate a couple good looks? Yes, but they also had a couple good looks that came to nothing largely. And so it just. This one was tough. This one was tough, and I'll be honest, I'm just getting a little sick and tired of these guys. I really am.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, to begin with, in the 4th minute of play, you had that one boneheaded move. So it was, Gabriel, I think, passed it back to Raya, and then Raya, when he was accepting the pass, I don't know what he was doing, but it bounced from like the goal line to the 6-yard line, and Haaland saw an opportunity and pounced on it, and we were lucky to get that away from him.
Yeah, I thought that was is really just a credit to Haaland, because Raya will do that sometimes. The ball comes into him and he plays it out in front of himself. Mm-hmm. Like he's not trapping it and holding it at his feet. He's trying to, because he's playing it in front of himself to prepare to make a pass or kick it upfield. Mm-hmm. And that's something I think obviously City had been aware of and watched. And the moment he plays that ball, Haaland makes a break for it, and we dodged a bullet on that one. That was definitely a kind of a. It was a heart in the throat moment early on. It could have easily really put this game in a very different position. And just a little bit later, they had the one. It took us forever to figure out exactly what had happened, but it ends up hitting the post and we were able to grab it. Raya was able to grab it and get rid of it.
Yeah, well, right. And I missed it live, so to speak, when I was watching the replay, but I missed it in real time because I was still taking notes about Haaland going after Raya. And I was like, wait, what? So yeah, it looked at first like it went in, like that looked like a goal because it was spinning like toward the goal, but I guess it just barely went clear before it went out and behind. But yeah, the rolling, I wasn't sure.
It did have a look. If you watch hockey games, a lot of times they'll take a shot in a hockey goal. There's that post in the middle of the net.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll see they'll shoot in and it hits it so hard that it comes right back out. And sometimes teams will keep playing because they're like, oh, it hit the post, it didn't go in. And then the team that scored is like, no, I scored. So it looks a little bit like that, but obviously there's no post in the middle of the soccer goal. So I mean, for all the positives they have, if they score early on in this game, I don't want to say if they score like those first 10 minutes like that, I don't know that it's a nightmare scenario, but it's definitely not a great place for us to be, which of course makes it a little frustrating a few minutes later when they finally do break through.
Yeah, they did. It was, what do you think actually led to that? I mean, obviously Nkapie had the last Arsenal touch before, who was Cherki got it. But what do you think, if you had to attribute blame, like who do you think that lands at the feet of?
I mean, I think some of it falls to Eze, who's kind of loses a duel. And he doesn't lose it. I hesitate to say he loses the duel because that suggests he really put in for it. He kind of he did a lot of good today. He also pulled out of some challenges here and there, which I think led to his ultimately being subbed off. He kind of pulls out of this challenge. The ball gets ahead, and he gets to Cherki. And I mean, he's obviously a very talented young player. He dances through the box. I mean, at that point it gets tough because you can sort of see Saliba Gabriel like make for him, but also kind of pull back because if he makes any contact, he's spilling to the ground and probably picking up a penalty.
Right.
I mean, this is the same guy who was playing keepy uppy in the Carabao Cup, and of course immediately runs over to the Arsenal fans to celebrate in front of. So I'm gonna stop talking about that right now. I can't have on the air.
I didn't notice that. I didn't know that's where the supporter stands were at the Etihad.
Yeah, it's frustrating because it's a player who's capable of doing that, and you just kind of gave him the space. But again, I think that's also generated from a turnover that didn't have to be a turnover. So that's kind of one of those. It feels like we should have done better. Like the fact by the time he gets the ball at his feet, it's almost. I don't want to say it's too late, but it's kind of too late because he gets ahead of steam, and the only thing you can do is foul, and you're too close to that.
Right. Yeah. So thankfully, though, that one didn't sting for very long before Kai Havertz did what I recall him doing one time last season, where he was just aggressively charging at the keeper, or at least the last defender. I don't remember what the case was last season, but boy, did he make a fool of Donnarumma.
And that's like Donnarumma has weaknesses. I mean, he's an excellent shot stopper, partly because he's huge. But I mean, we saw him last year. He was really important to PSG, beating us in that semifinal. But he is not comfortable with the ball at his feet. And Havertz went after him, and it was so key because it came right after their goal. Yeah. And to be able to jump right back into the tie. I'll be honest, once we did that, I'm not going to say I thought we were going to win, but I was like, oh, we're going to do this. We're going to do it. Like it's the kind of play you make when things are going well for you. I mean, again, we talked about the transitioning from the Sporting into this game. That is the kind of play you make when you're feeling good and things go well for you. Like it's an excellent play from Havertz. And, honestly, it allowed us to settle back into the kind of game I think we wanted to play. I think we ceded possession probably a little more than we wanted to. But for the most part, I think the expectation was we were going to be playing defensively. They were going to be coming at us. And overall, in the first half, I thought we did a decent job limiting their real opportunities. and I was pretty happy with us being at 1-1. The only thing that really bothered me in the first half was the yellow card being picked up by Mosquera, which I'll be honest, I thought was kind of soft for a yellow.
Yeah, it's, I'm still calibrating for that. Like when I saw it slowed down, which obviously always makes stuff look worse, it didn't bother me so much necessarily. Like it was, pulling him down by his shoulders. Like I could see it. It didn't really bother me. What did you see that I didn't?
Well, what bothered me about it was, and I've had a lot of negative things to say about Anthony Taylor as a referee over the course of doing the show. I don't have a lot coming out of this game. I thought he certainly let the teams play. Like he was accepting of a pretty decent level of physicality. And I guess in the context of this game and seeing the things that some cases weren't even whistled, much less given cards, for that to be a yellow felt soft and it felt harsh because, I mean, Mosquera's got a really difficult task of dealing with Doku, who's tortured us in Wembley. Right. And, I thought had a pretty good game today as well. But I thought Mosquera did really well with him. But, now he's playing, 70? When did he pick up that? When was that yellow picked up? 40 minutes? Yeah, just shy of 40 minutes. I mean, you're talking about playing almost an hour on a yellow with a guy who can blow by you.
Yeah.
Just, that's not a position you need to find yourself in. And that felt... I felt to me at that point like Mosquera's day, the clock was ticking on him. Like he wasn't going to be able to finish because at some point you have to take him off before he ends up doing something, or before being on the yellow prevents him from playing as well as he did. I thought he picked up and he did fine the rest of the way, but oof.
Yeah. I mean, so for me, when we scored that leveler, I turned to my son who I was watching with and I said, we just might win this. But then into the second half, when Erling Haaland got the ball at his feet and did what he does, I mean, honestly, I haven't seen that many Erling Haaland goals in my time watching Arsenal. We generally do a pretty good job containing him. He hasn't been super effective against us, but man.
He's been very quiet in 2026. Like I think he only has 4 goals, they said, since the turn of the calendar now.
Okay.
But there are a number of things that frustrate me about this goal. But the first was it came on the back of us having some of the best possession and some of the best opportunities of the game. Because this is when we have that play. Havertz, Ødegaard makes a good pass to Havertz. Donnarumma makes a good save. He's able to get in position to make us. I don't think he made the save, but certainly caused Martinelli to kind of double clutch on the shot and allowed the defenders to get back. And then we had the one Eze just turns around and rifles it off the post and just so close.
But inside edge of the post. Yeah.
That's the one you're kind of looking at going, okay. Like this is how you build, this is how we go. And then you can almost see it happening. Ødegaard triggers a press. Martinelli doesn't track the guy who runs. And they get a free run into our area. I'm not throwing this one on Martinelli because he's, there are a couple of things happened after that, but it's not a good start. It allows them to get the run in, and the ball gets its way to Haaland, who, let's be honest, was pulling on Gabriel's shirt. You can watch the video. There are pictures. This is not. He's pulling on Gabriel's shirt. Gets in a position and he finishes. And it just had to be, didn't it? It just had to be.
Yeah. It's frustrating. But credit, I mean, regardless of how he got into that position to hit that shot falling to the ground and place it where it needed to go, it was a good shot. I wish it didn't result from an uncalled offensive foul.
He's a finisher. And I won't go so far as to say uncalled offensive foul, although it is fair to point out that there are certain players who are able to get away with that sort of thing and certain players who don't. But he's a goal scorer. He gets those kind of opportunities. It was at least the second one he had in the game I could think of. You give him enough of those, he's going to bury them. And it's hard, right? Because as a defender, you have to be right. Oh, it feels like you have to be right every time, whereas he only has to be right one time, and there you go.
Yeah.
But still, I think at that point, I still think, 65 minutes, there was enough time for us. All we needed was another goal. Which again, we'll just go back to Haaland really quick. Obviously, shortly afterwards, we get into another little shirt tussle there, and of course, Haaland's shirt gets torn off.
Yeah, that was. I mean, let me just say, it was really fun seeing the replays of him like yelling at the referee, just seeing angry Haaland. I liked seeing angry Haaland. I like knowing that Gabriel got to him, but yeah.
I mean, he and Gabriel go at each other. They're two physical players. They're strong guys. They like playing physically.
Almost as tall as each other. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and is Gabriel pulling on his shirt? Sure. Just like Haaland is pulling on they're just the whole game is them going back and forth. And okay, fine, the shirt gets torn, but like this is what's happening the whole game, and it's not getting called. I mean, again, I could be critical of Taylor in some instances or some ways, but like that, the way you've called the game to that point, you're not calling the shirt tugs. Well, then you can't call the shirt tug.
Right.
And they kind of went back and forth on each other. And, the counter argument to that maybe is that you needed to call something perhaps even a little earlier because arguably it boils over, or what was that about, 15 minutes later.
Right.
I'll say this. Gabriel is somewhat lucky to have not picked up a red in that instance.
Yeah.
But having said that, like, let's not pretend that Haaland doesn't instigate the contact. He leans his head forward. He's like...
Right, he's the one who puts his head up against Gabriel first.
Yeah, and it's... Again, it's one of those things where and again, some of this is outside narrative. We kind of have to channel Eza and say, I don't care what other people think. But it is frustrating to sort of watch this all go on. And now the post-game conversation is, well, maybe Gabriel should have had a red card. No, honestly, I thought this was absolutely the right call. Like, pull them out, separate them. You're both doing this. Probably should have been given the card 10, 15 minutes earlier. But, it's clear you're both doing this. It's time to, it's gone too far. And of course Guardiola was complaining about it. So,
yeah, he got the yellow card after they got their yellow cards. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because he's shouting about all that's going on. Yeah,
in fairness regarding the possibility of a red card, like calling that particularly a headbutt, like, I don't think that would have stood up to VAR scrutiny, probably.
Oh, no, that's exactly the kind of thing VAR would call. Because they don't need the headbutt to be like full-on Zidane, right into the guy's chest. I mean, Gabriel pushes his head forward. If Haaland pulls back at all and Gabriel ends up like making... I mean, first of all, don't do that. Like, headbutting people is kind of dumb. Just,
right.
Like, in general, for the safety of your actual head and face.
Yeah.
But no, if he comes sort, we've seen cards for that. We've seen red cards for that. Guy pushed his head forward into someone. That's a red.
But what's different to me? Their heads were already in contact. It was like a head shove, not a head butt.
Again, I think it's being blown slightly out of proportion because of that. And again, it's Gabriel the villain against poor innocent Erling Haaland, and imagine me making an offensive gesture in response to that.
Yeah.
It's frustrating. I don't mind that in general because I think that's a lot of ways the game we wanted to play. We wanted it to be physical. We wanted it to be mucky and dirty and kind of down in the gutter because that was kind of where we were going to be more successful. It's just, we can look at the substitutions in this game. I mean, honestly, I think one of the strangest things about the whole game, we didn't really talk about this in prep, but we got a full 90 minutes out of Ødegaard. What did you think of Ødegaard today?
It's good having him back. I mean, you can definitely tell the difference when he's on the pitch, just kind of holding things together more, basically.
I was surprised he went the full 90 minutes. I was...
When they were prepping to bring on the subs, I did think that would be when they took him off, and they kept him on. They brought off Eza instead.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is Eza's... less strong defensively, which is kind of an interesting call to make, given that we're at the point we kind of need the goal. But he had been a little soft. I mean, he had some great dribbles, some spins, some turns, but there were a couple of times they ended up with some giveaways, including some giveaways like you got to run through the guy. I mean, you got to push through. You got to try to, you gave it up just a little cheaply there. Yeah, Ødegaard, I think, was a little loose with the ball. I'm just surprised he put on. He does a lot for us. I don't know. I thought he was. Yeah, because I'm just trying to think of the subs. I mean, we brought on Gyökeres. Didn't really do a whole lot. I mean, we brought on Ben White, who was okay. Trossard was probably the best of the subs that came on.
Well, yeah, he made that cross to Havertz.
I mean, incredible cross, and Havertz. Yeah. And I mean, what do you say that? I mean, Havertz knows. I thought Havertz had a decent game. Obviously, he creates the goal, but he wants that one back. I don't know.
No, definitely. It was disappointing, but yeah, getting back to Ødegaard, I didn't notice anything. Let me put it that way. Like, it seemed like he was doing what he usually does. I didn't see him making the giveaways. I saw a lot of giveaways in general. I think we gave up the ball way too easily. You can see it in the possession stats. Like we had like half as much possession as they did.
Yeah. But again, it kind of goes into sort of the fine margins here, because City are going to look at this game and sort of feel about they missed some chances, had some bad giveaways as well. Obviously, they're going to be a little concerned with some of the transition plays that led to our opportunities where we create some chances and hit the post, or Donnarumma has to make the save. I mean, they're going to come away with some things that they would theoretically want to work on. Although I think what's true for us is also true for them. I think we're the best team either of us is going to see the rest of the way. Certainly in the league we are. I mean, I guess it depends a little bit on what you think about Bayern or PSG in a potential Champions League final, or Atletico Madrid.
Right.
It really does feel like in a lot of ways this came down to some really fine margins. They got one or two balls in the right place, and we got one or two of ours that just didn't quite make it. And it's frustrating because it doesn't. Again, deserve has nothing to do with it, but it feels like a draw would have been a deserved result. And it's still sort of processing a little bit, just being in that position, being in the position where. Being in this position throughout the day, I'm having trouble articulating my thoughts because I'm still a little emotional about it. Just this was a tough one.
I definitely went through a brief flash of wanting to like throw my Arsenal jerseys in a heap and start a bonfire. I am not beyond getting frustrated. Like I was definitely there. I've talked myself down a little bit, but yeah, it's if we do end up not going all the way this season, like I think you have to look back to Bournemouth last week as the real deciding factor, even more than this one. But this one definitely hurts.
I mean, we could point to a lot of games, honestly. I mean, the loss at home to United, dropping points against Wolves. I mean, and the other thing too is, I mean, honestly, if you want to look at a big moment in the season, it's in the January window when City picks up Semenyo and Mark Gahey.
I forgot that Gahey was new too.
Yeah, I mean, and we don't generally get into too much of the money stuff here because it is what it is. They have a lot of money and they spend it, and to their credit, they spent it wisely. Those are two really good players, and they were able to generate that kind of thing. I mean, it feels so hollow to say it because it kind of is hollow to say it, but I mean, given what we've been dealing with injury-wise, like we talked about the depth we've been using all of it all season. Like that's like it hasn't really. We haven't really been in a position where we can truly rotate the way you want, and we've been using that depth. And the fact that in all of that, we could still be on top of the league, which we are. Let's be clear, we are still on top of the league for the time being. And into the semifinals of the Champions League, and having made the Carabao Cup final, and having made the quarterfinal, like to compete on all fronts the way we did, is it says something, but it's kind of frustrating that we walked into this game with Ødegaard, who's coming back for the first time in a couple of weeks, with missing Bukayo Saka, not having Jury and Timber. I mean, that's three. I mean, that's two players who are missing. Two really important players are missing. Not having Calafiori at left back. So
right. For this week's formation station, there is an interesting configuration. I guess you could say we were kind of forced to take on, but something that we hadn't seen heretofore. So we had our traditional Saliba and Gabriel in the center, but then our wingbacks were Hincapié and Mosquera. And Mosquera is definitely the more surprising of those. We basically had four players who most of the season have been our center back options all across the back line. How do you think that ended up going? I mean, do you think that's something that we should continue as we play against Newcastle and others in the league and potentially even in the Champions League?
I mean, I think what we're really doing is crossing our fingers that Timber and Calafiori can come back to the team. I mean, I thought both of them acquitted themselves well, Hincapié and Mosquera. And as they were acquired, they were purchased with the idea that they were basically more of a Mosquera, a right-sided defender, Hincapié, a left-sided defender, that they could play the center back position on that side or step out and be the backs. I think their games, I think they are the backup options. Again, ideally, we'd have other players there. I thought both of them acquitted themselves very well in this game and this week, so I'm not going to be too critical about their performances. As you say, it is a little bit forced on us. I mean, we had Ben White, we had Miles Lewis-Skelly as potential options on the outside, but I do think we were overall more solid with Mosquera and Hincapié than we would have been had we played those other two based on their form from this season.
Boy, thinking of Miles Lewis-Skelly in this, that brings me back to when we routed Manchester City a little over a year ago. Boy, I wonder if that's what this match needed, was some Miles Lewis-Skelly ribbing Erling Haaland.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't played well enough to earn that position. That's he hasn't played well enough to be trusted in the game of this. It'd be interesting to see if we end up seeing him at some points, thinking about how they might rotate with Atletico Madrid in the Champions League in the coming weeks. But we are kind of in a position where we kind of have to win. We do have to. I don't know that we have to win out, but we pretty much have to win out to get where we want to be.
Yeah. This week we were home to Sporting in the Champions League and away to Manchester City in the Premier League. Who is your player of the week?
Across the two legs, I'm going to say Pierre Hincapié was probably across both games a good performer. Obviously playing that left back position, a little bit out of position for him. He's not quite as adventurous going forward as Calafiori, but really, who is? But overall,
Zinchenko maybe, but yeah.
Overall, I thought he had a really solid game, both sides. I mean, could he leave you wanting a little more offensively? Yeah, but I thought defensively he played well. He was able to cause some problems for City when they came down that left side. And, part of a strong defensive performance overall from the club against Sporting. So for me, I'm going to say Hincapié for this week.
Yeah, it's a good pick. He was definitely looking good. Honestly, not enough happened in the Sporting match for me to really draw too heavily from it. But based on what I do recall and largely informed by today's City match, I'm going to pick someone maybe perhaps a little controversially, but I think Eza, in spite of his faults, which I acknowledge, it wasn't a perfect performance, but I really liked a lot of what I saw today, which I haven't seen him put the moves on the way that he was today. Just dancing around them to get into a dangerous position to either shoot himself or get the ball to someone who was getting into a dangerous position. I really liked seeing him do that. And you may notice that is kind of a theme. Like I like when players do that. Madueke has gotten the nod in the past for similar reasons. Martinelli recently. Like I feel overall, I liked watching Eza today more than any other player who was out there, which is what I'm basing it on.
I mean, I can certainly appreciate his qualities with the ball at his feet. I am a little concerned, as I said, that he was just a little too much of a liability defensively, and I think he was partly at fault on their opening goal. And I think there were a few other times he gave the ball away a little too easily.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's for my taste. But I did have some good moments, and he is certainly bright on the ball, and I think is probably one of the few players we have, certainly was playing today, who can really create something out of nothing.
Yeah, it was good. I'm hoping he continues to grow into his role at Arsenal. I'm hoping that summer training allows him to kind of go back to defensive school and become more responsible in that regard. And I'm excited to see him do that. Hopefully he does. Well, we're still top of the table for the moment, at least.
Yes, it seems it. Well, so I shouldn't say it seems like. So the scenario is we are 3 points ahead of Manchester City. They will play a makeup game against Burnley on Wednesday of this week, and if they win that game, due to goal difference and goals scored, plus the points added, they would then go top. So we may well be in a place where we are in second when we kick off our game against Newcastle on Saturday.
Yeah, definitely not where we wanted to be. But what do we take away from this? Like, what does the rest of the season look like? Is there something to cling to?
Yeah, so we are going to close the season with Newcastle, Fulham, West Ham, Burnley, and Palace. None of those games are going to move because our schedule's basically locked in from here on out. City does have the game in hand. They're going to play Burnley, and then they'll play Everton, Brentford, Bournemouth, and Villa. Plus, they still have a game against Palace that's going to be rescheduled. I think it's fair to look at this and say that we have the slightly easier run-in. But I do think we're going to be in a place where we kind of... I know it looks like City is likely to finish the season strong and just run out the rest of the way and win out. Obviously, we don't necessarily feel that way, but I do think we kind of need to be in a position. Our mentality has to be a little bit like where we were 2 years ago, in that the year where they ended up winning. City took the title on the last day, which is maybe they do win every game the rest of the way, but we have to make them need to do it. And we've talked about it. I know they're flying high. They just came off a stretch where they beat, Liverpool, Chelsea, and Arsenal in succession. So yeah, they're feeling pretty good about themselves. Fair enough. We've also seen them drop points to Forest, to Spurs, to West Ham. Like, this is a City team that has given up opportunities and dropped points, which is why they're behind at this stage. And so, in a sense, you could argue it only takes one of these games where they're just not firing quite right, and all of a sudden, Arsenal's back in front. We have to make sure that's the case. If they run the table from here on out, what do? You tip your cap, and that's that. But if they stumble, we have to be ready. So, it is not over yet. We've seen a lot of twists and turns in this title race so far this season. But we are obviously in a much weaker position than we were, a week, 10 days ago, which is unfortunate. Definitely. And it's largely self-inflicted, which is the real frustrating part.
Well, let's cheer ourselves up a little bit and talk about the bottom of the table, where currently Spurs sits in 18th place at the top of the relegation zone, behind West Ham by 1 point now. They had been, I think, even on points for a while. Boy.
Yeah, they drew this weekend. Who were they playing? Hold on, I just remember they drew against Brighton.
Yeah.
Giving up the game tying goal in the 95th minute at home.
Ooh.
Spurs hasn't won a home game since December 6th.
Whew.
In the Premier League, I should say. But they have one at home in Europe. But good God, they're a mess. They haven't won a Premier League game since they beat Crystal Palace on December 28th.
Have
They are over in 2026. They are in real danger. They have a real problem. They might be able to pull it out, but man, they're running out of chances.
Right.
So we got that going for us, which is nice.
Before we leave the Premier League table, let me ask you one other thing. I'm looking at it on the Premier League site right now, and I see it's been updated for the 5 Champions League spots. But I'm noticing the 6th spot is for the Europa League. I'm not seeing a Conference League spot mentioned. Is that usually omitted, or is it because we gained the extra Champions League spot, we don't get a Conference League spot? Do you know?
No, so technically the Conference League spot is held by Manchester City by virtue of having won the League Cup. Now, and actually, I think I'm looking at this. I believe both Arsenal and City have actually qualified for. Yeah, I think Arsenal, we knew had qualified for the Champions League. City has now qualified officially for the Champions League, so that actually opens up the 7th spot to be for the 7th place spot to be for the Conference League.
Okay, I gotcha. So
and we should also add, by the way,
okay.
We should also have the winner of the FA Cup gets an automatic berth into the Europa League. But right now, I think it'd be fair to argue. Well, I don't know. I mean, Manchester City is in that competition too. They're arguably one of the favorites. Of course, if they win the FA Cup, then it just dips down to 6th place, the 6th place team.
Right.
Hold on, I'm just pulling up. I believe they play Southampton in one of the their semifinal. And it's Chelsea and Leeds is the other one. So I guess Chelsea could actually grab that Europa League spot both by the table and by the cup.
Huh. Interesting. What is coming up for next week?
So next week, first we get a breather. No midweek games. Champions League doesn't pick up until the following week, which is a nice change of pace for once. But we're gonna have to be ready because we host Newcastle on Saturday. Because on the one hand, Newcastle's form recently has been kind of dire. They have. People talk about our struggles. Newcastle's having a rough go of it. But having said that, we are not in a position to be. I mean, Newcastle's a team that's given us a lot of problems. I thoroughly expect a physical game. I thoroughly expect to want to punch one of their players before the game's over. It's not going to be easy. We kind of have to mentally put ourselves in a place where we got to be up for it. I think we can do it. We're at home. I think it's a game we should win, but you got to. Should's not good enough right now. You got to do it.
Right. Yeah.
And that game, by the way, we should add, will be on Peacock on Saturday.
Yes, exclusively on Peacock, not even just like as an option. Yes. Thank you for the note. Thanks for joining us at Gooner U. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can also listen to the podcast of our show on Apple, Spotify, and some other places. If you're only listening, try watching us on YouTube with the link in the show notes. Your homework for today is to comment on one of our videos or to comment and write a review on the podcast player that you're listening in. In particular, we'd love to hear your questions, and we would love to answer them on the show if you do so. We record the show using Zencaster. If you'd like to try it out, you can support Gooner U by signing up using the link in the description, which also has links to everything we talked about and our socials. Again, my name is Dove, and you can find me on Twitter at Dove Frankel. With me, as always, is Keith, and you can find him in a pub watching Arsenal matches.
Keep the faith, Gooners.